Mood disorders like anxiety and depression can create a pretty significant challenge for the world of science and medicine. And this is because science is really focused on looking for the one answer so that medicine can then provide the one treatment option. And this system works really quite well for a lot of the illnesses and health issues that we deal with today. But for depression, anxiety, and mood disorders, this is not so much the case. And this is because there's not really one cause, which means there's never really going to be able to be one treatment option. In fact, there was a paper that was published in the Journal of Biological Psychiatry in 2023, which describes this conundrum that science has. And it states that it is a field that is struggling with stagnation with regards to biomarker and treatment discovery. So basically, they can't even really work out what to measure. And if they can't work out what to measure to really kind of categorize what is causing, what are the signs of, then they of course can't work out what they can then do to treat it. And of course, we know antidepressants have been around for a long time, and there's really varying effects with who they work for and who they don't, with some people finding quite great benefits from them, some people really quite resistant to any positive effect from them, which sort of does suggest that there is more to the story than just antidepressants and increasing serotonin levels. But what is becoming increasingly established through the science exploring all of this is that there's a very strong link when it comes to nutrition and food. And while a lot of this evidence really comes from population studies, so there's not a whole lot of clinical trials on this because it's something that's very hard to kind of manage in a clinical trial. So it means we have to interpret the research and the findings somewhat carefully. The link is very, very strong in the research. And I think in a field where there's such great need and so limited options and really no negative effect from the changes that we might make nutrition, lifestyle, diet-wise, it's something that is really worth us considering and exploring to just see where we can go with all of this. So if you don't know me, I'm Mandy. I am a registered clinical nutritionist. And one of the key things that I love is really exploring this interplay between nutrition and movement, or the basic activities of life, and how those affect our health. And nutrition and impact on mental health is really one of these areas that I like digging into. So I want to look at this through three key ways that nutrition can have an impact on our mental health and well-being, which gives a little bit of power back in a field where there is, the data is still patchy and the treatment options are limited. What can we do? So the first one we're going to look at is high refined carb diets and blood sugar issues. Now, we know that incidence of things like insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and diabetes is absolutely on the rise. And we also know that in that group of population, they have a greater risk of mood-related disorders compared to people that have not got that diagnosis. So there's already a correlation there, which is quite interesting. We also know from research-based studies that the greater proportion of your calories that come from highly refined carbohydrates increases your risk of being diagnosed with a mood-related disorder. So again, there's a correlated link there. As one goes up, the other also goes up. In the more short-term kind of picture, blood sugar drops also quite tightly linked with anxiety, panic attacks, those sorts of things. And if you extrapolate that out over the long term, if someone's always having these blood sugar lows, there's also, again, an increased risk of mood-related disorders. So there's all these correlations, all these links with blood sugar balance, refined carbohydrates, and mental health. What they don't really know is what is the exact mechanism of action here. And, I think that there probably isn't just one. There's probably many mechanisms of going on here. And what we can do with that is say, well, there's this strong link. Improving our nutrition, improving our blood sugar balance has a positive effect on so many areas of our health. So it's a no-brainer to really address that and look at what we're doing there to support that, whether it's looking at reducing, refined carbs and sugars, looking at getting your carbohydrates from whole food sources, looking at protein levels to balance blood sugar out. All of those sorts of things are going to potentially have quite a positive effect on mood as well, and no negative side effects. The other one here, which is perhaps a little bit less known about, is inflammatory diets and immune activation. So, what's the evidence here? Well, some really interesting research in this sort of sphere is that they've given non steroidal anti inflammatory medications, so Nurofen, ibuprofen, those sorts of things, to people that are being treated for depression, and they've noticed a significant improvement in their symptoms compared to the people that were not given the anti inflammatories. Don't really know what the link here is, but that's something that has been observed in the research. And we also know that anti-inflammatory agents like omega-3 and fish oil, etc., have a mood improving effect, so reducing symptoms of mood disorders. Now, there's possibly many ways that inflammation or inflammatory molecules in the body are contributing to mental health issues. But one of the main ones that I think of here is if we have an increased level of inflammatory molecules in our body, there's a greater risk of developing permeability of our blood-brain barrier. So our brain is protected by a semi-permeable membrane called our blood-brain barrier. And this protects our brain from an influx of chemicals and molecules, etc., that are in our blood that shouldn't be in our brain. Our brain's a very delicately balanced organ, and when it's exposed to things that it shouldn't be, then it doesn't function as well as it should. So the blood-brain barrier does this very, very important protective function for our brain, and as inflammation increases in the body, that can become more permeable, meaning our brain is exposed to things it shouldn't be, meaning it doesn't function quite as well. And this can create kind of more of a excitatory kind of environment in our brain, which can show up as mood-related symptoms. Inflammatory molecules also mess with our HPA axis, or our stress response in the body, and this can create, again, an environment where our body is really reactive, and this puts more pressure on the neurotransmitters and stuff to balance all of this, creating more mood disorders. Now, why is this interesting? You think, well, I don't have any, inflammatory condition or anything. But the reality is that inflammation within the body is a natural process of our body protecting itself, is a natural part of our immune response to things. And with the clients that I look at when I'm looking at their bloods and stuff, even in an individual that otherwise seems healthy, we very often see these elevated inflammatory molecules. And so it is really worth considering, because sometimes the inflammation isn't necessarily come from a diagnosed condition, but it might be from blood sugar imbalance, or it might be from gut disruption, or it might even be from chronic stress that's creating this increase in inflammatory molecules that then flow on to having a negative impact on the brain. And again, the part here is that we may not even know what the exact mechanism of action is. We know that there's this very strong correlation, but we also know that there's stuff that we can do in our day-to-day to minimize and reduce that risk. So looking at reducing and removing the highly inflammatory foods like sugar and alcohol and processed foods and the seed oils and all those sorts of things, and replacing those with vegetables and high-quality foods and good protein sources and omega-3 fatty acids and all those sorts of things. These are things that are within our control that we can choose to do if we want to, and they have no negative effect. They're going to have a positive effect on mood and all of that as well. The last part here is gut disruption. Now, the link between gut and mood is also pretty well established, pretty well, there's not too much argument on this anymore. But again, the exact mechanism may be not quite fully understood yet. But a couple of things we do know. One, there's some research with fecal transplants where they have taken the fecal matter from a depressed individual and a non-depressed individual and put this into mice, and what they see is that the mice that received the fecal matter from the depressed individual start to display more depressive type symptoms in a short amount of time, where they withdraw and they stop eating and these sorts of things. So we know that there's something going on there to do with the microbes and the gut bacteria that are there. We also know that probiotics have a positive effect for a lot of people on mood related stuff. And what they're starting to see now is that in the gut bacteria of people that are diagnosed with mood disorders versus those that perhaps don't have, they can see some pretty big changes. And the changes are often that there's higher levels of certain bacteria in the depressed individual's gut and low levels of bacteria, particularly bacteria that produce short chain fatty acids. The link here is that short chain fatty acids, which are produced largely in the large intestines by good bacteria, have a very anti inflammatory positive effect on our brain, but on our body as a whole. And so, lower levels of these might mean that there's higher levels of inflammatory molecules being produced by bacteria, and this can create a really big disruption here. And I think all of this really links together because we live in a world and we consume a diet which is highly processed and highly inflammatory, but also not full of the stuff that really feeds our good gut bugs. And so, if we start to make these changes along the lines of increasing plants and fibers and those sorts of things, and diversifying our gut bacteria, we get a flow on effect to lower levels of inflammation. And all of these things play towards improving mood, improving mental health. And while it may not necessarily be the answer, because I'm not sure if there ever will be the answer with any of this, there's no negative to it. There's potentially a lot of positive effects there, and it may minimize a whole lot of the chronic burden on society of this condition, which is absolutely, quite serious. It's hard to measure, but very, very real. So these are the three components. There's the blood sugar component, balancing blood sugar, reducing the refined carbohydrates, managing inflammation to protect the blood-brain barrier and reduce those inflammatory molecules in the body, and really looking to feed the gut and improve that microbial diversity, which has a flow-on effect to positive mood, etc. These are things within our control that we can start doing today. We've actually, some time ago, we did a full training on this, going a whole lot deeper into this, a deep dive into a few more details here. If you would like access to this, if this has triggered something for you and you want to dig a little bit deeper into it, I'd love to give that out to you. Just comment mood below and we can send that out to you. And it's going to offer you a whole lot more information. And hopefully, if this sparks some questions for you, we can help you with those as well. Cool. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys. Bye.